Join us today as we painfully rip the Band-Aid from the Pusser myth and expose the true story of Buford Pusser to the light of day. Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages. We are here again today to rip yet another Band-Aid off that Pusser legend and expose the true story to the light of day. Now, one of the things that many of us have had to face over the years when we try to rationally discuss anything with the rabid Pusser fans is that they believe that the State Line Mob, the Dixie Mafia, Junior Smith, and a few of his friends were the ones that murdered Buford Pusser. Well, let's set the record straight. Buford Pusser died as a result of a drunk driving accident where his blood alcohol concentration was measured at 0.18, about twice the state's legal limit back then. One of the privileges that I've had over the years is to interview the trooper that worked his fatal accident, Paul Irvin, who was later McNairy County Sheriff himself. And when I spoke with Paul, he told me that he did indeed have to change his report several times before his supervisor would approve it. Now, it really got me to wondering what that was all about. And Paul told me it was one of those things that he changed everything he could. Finally, on his last revision, the only thing he altered was when he removed the fact that Buford was 0.18. So he died of a drunk driving accident. He wasn't murdered. He wasn't assassinated by any of these people like the Pusser legend has it, and so many Pusser fans believe. But we'll get into all that. So here we go. Now I have Paul Irvin's report here, and you'll see it on the screen, where he says that he was dispatched to an accident about 7 miles east of Selmer. Well, when he was en route to that accident, he said that about a mile before he got there, he could see the flames. And when he arrived, he indicated that there were several people at the scene, including T.W. Burks, Danny Browder, Jason Hollingsworth, and Dewana Pusser. He said that when he got there, he noticed all the damage to the car. It was on fire. And about 100 feet from that accident scene is where he saw Buford's body. Now, this gives me an opportunity to clear up another myth and part of the Pusser legend, and that being that Dewana Pusser, when she arrived at the accident scene and seeing her father's body laying just inches from the car that was on fire, that she picked him up and carried him away so that he wouldn't be burned. Well, actually, it was Jason Hollingsworth that was with her, and he is the one that did most of that, so there goes another part of the legend that we can shoot down. Things really got kind of strange there. When he was interviewing Danny Browder, he said that he had heard the accident, that it sounded like a jet screaming down the highway, and then he heard the crash. He couldn't see anything when he stepped out on his porch to see what was happening, so he got in his vehicle, drove down there, and he saw Buford's body was almost directly behind the car, and there was a small fire under the hood. So he went back to his house knowing that he needed a lot of help, and he called for assistance. Of course, other people started to soon arrive. One of those being a deputy sheriff named David Killingsworth, and it wouldn't be long until medical examiner Harry Peeler arrived at the scene. And of course, he examined Buford and knew that he was dead. And Buford was transported to the McNairy County General Hospital. It was there that Killingsworth said that he was with Peeler when he drew blood from Buford's body to check for substances. And that came back at being 0.18 blood alcohol concentration. So yes, regardless of what Pusser fans tell you, Buford was intoxicated when he died. Dewana Pusser was also at the fair that night. And when it came time to leave, she wanted to ride home with her friend Tina. So with Buford's permission, Miss Durbin drove Dewana home that night. As they were going toward Adamsville, a car passed Miss Durbin at a high rate of speed. And Dewana said, "There's Daddy." And Miss Durbin said, "I hope he doesn't get killed before he gets home." Well, a little bit later, they topped a hill. They could see something up in front of them. When they got there, they realized it was Buford's car. They got out. Dewana was the first one to get there, but Miss Durbin was right behind. When Shirley Durbin reached down, put her hands on his chest, checked for a pulse, heartbeat, found nothing. She said that Dewana was running out in the street everywhere. So, that does lead us to wonder, did Dewana get there soon enough for Buford to try and say her name? Or was that Dewana's imagination that she believes so much that it eventually became part of the myth and the legend? Now, as we know, Buford had been at the county fair himself earlier that evening. Some who encountered him there thought that he had been drinking. Others say that they didn't detect anything, while others said that, well, something was definitely wrong with him. Of those that said that they didn't notice anything peculiar about Buford, the first was Benny Gaines, who owned Coleman's Barbecue in Selmer. Gaines would say that Buford came in early that evening, ordered 2 large barbecue sandwiches and a large glass of water. He said he returned a few minutes later and ordered a fish sandwich and another large glass of water. Gaines said he didn't detect any smell of alcohol around Buford. Another person who suggested that Buford seemed perfectly normal that night was a friend of his, Don Maxedon. Maxedon would tell troopers during an interview that he was with Buford that night for a little while. He went to the parking lot, and Buford was having some sandwiches from Coleman's Barbecue. He said he sat there and spoke with Buford for about 20 minutes or so. He said then Buford left, spinning his tires, driving like Buford normally would. He said about 60 seconds later that the Durbin vehicle left the parking lot and was also headed for Adamsville. Maxedon suggested that he didn't smell any alcohol on Buford or see any effects of it about his person. Others, however, remember that night very differently, such as Denny Howell, a well-known citizen of McNairy County. He was attending the fair with his niece when they encountered Buford. Howell remembers Buford stuttering more than usual and thought that Buford was having problems of some kind. As Pusser walked away, Howell's niece looked at Denny and said that she thought that she smelled alcohol on his breath and said that he was drinking something out of a Coleman cup. In a separate interview, Trooper Paul Irvin interviewed Angie Locke, Denny Howell's niece, and she told Trooper Irvin that she thought she smelled alcohol on Buford's breath and that he was indeed drinking something out of a Coleman's barbecue cup. Next, there was Mr. Carroll Botiford. Now, Botiford said that he saw Buford shooting a basketball at a game there at the McNairy County Fair and said he approached him, spoke to him, said, but Buford was odd. He was not in a talkative mood. He was not like himself. And he knew something was wrong, but he wasn't sure what. He said he did go out to the parking lot about the time that Buford left and that Buford was spinning his tires and driving like a teenager.
Which has grossed about $50 million, tells the story of a young sheriff in rural Tennessee and his violent fight against the local underworld. The real-life hero was Buford Pusser, whose wife was killed by racketeers and who himself was the target of 7 assassination attempts. Buford Pusser, the father of 3, was killed last night in a highway crash at the age of 36. More on the story from David Dick in Selmer, Tennessee.
One day before he died, Buford Pusser held a news conference to announce he'd signed a $2 million contract to make a sequel to the movie about his life, Walking Tall.
Well, big fight, I'm scared. But I feel somewhat confident about it now after taking screen tests.
Shortly after midnight, Buford Pusser was heading home down this road, Highway 64. He was alone in the car. Today, there were long skid marks on the road, and the curious, many of them old friends of Pusser, gathered to look at the place where his car hit the embankment, flipped over, and burned. Pusser was thrown out and killed. Souvenir hunters picked up whatever they could find, like pieces of the windshield. The car was towed to a nearby service station where Pusser's close friend, Roger Horton, looking at the car's broken tie rod, said he had doubts that it was just an accident.
To me, like it's been cut. Looks like to me like it's been damaged. I don't believe it happened in a wreck because it hit sideways. And if it had, it don't look like it would have bothered this.
Tennessee State Police investigating the wreck say they believe the tie rod was broken on impact, but that the case is not closed. The investigation is continuing. David Dick, CBS News, Selmer, Tennessee.
Now, what you just saw was film footage from 1974, footage that I have had in my possession for more years than I care to remember. However, you heard it mention Roger Horton. Be sure and subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll get notifications of new videos when they're released. Now, Roger Horton was a friend of Buford's. They were pretty close, and Horton would say that he quite often rode with Buford and that he thought Buford was just too good of a driver for this to have happened, and that Buford had shared with him that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted Horton to look into it. Now, Horton admitted during the interview with the troopers that he was not a mechanical expert of any kind. He was just expressing his opinion. So, there you have that. He said that the motivation for him to say what he did was that if somebody had murdered Buford, he wanted to make sure they didn't get away with it. It's imperative that I mention that Buford's accident was thoroughly investigated, not only by the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, but the FBI also looked into it. I happen to have a 58-page report about the accident and the results that they found, which was nothing. None of these agencies found any signs of sabotage. So, Helen Pusser, using Dewana's trust fund money, I might add, hired a GM expert to evaluate the damage to Buford's car. He checked everything. It was unimaginable what all he looked into, trying to find if there was any signs of sabotage. Now, Mr. Bob White of White's Corvette shop was the engineer that Helen Pusser hired to examine the vehicle. Now, I might tell you that he had an MS in automotive engineering and technology, so you can imagine what he went through. He checked everything that could have affected the car before or after it started sliding. He checked the brakes on all four wheels, the rear axles, the drive shaft, the transmission, torque converter, and the list just goes on and on and on. And the two things that caught his attention that he examined most closely were tie rod ends on the left side and the number one piston of the engine. After reviewing all these, just like the Highway Patrol, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI, he found nothing. And he advised her that, in his opinion, Buford died as the result of an accident. So, not even her own expert could come up with anything. All I'm trying to say, folks, is that if you want to listen to the legend and be fooled about the Pusser legend, hey, that's your bad. Myself, I had rather have researched it, got the facts, got as much information as I possibly could to determine for myself what happened. Now, I know a lot of Pusser fans disagree, but hey, to me, more than one myth about the Pusser legend just went down in this single broadcast. So ask yourself, what have they really presented to prove that Buford was the victim of nefarious circumstances, that he was assassinated, killed by the state liners, killed by the Dixie Mafia? There is absolutely nothing out there thus far to show that. So, who would you rather listen to? People who have researched it or people who have not? So, folks, just remember, Buford Pusser, the other story, is where myths come to die and facts and truth are told. I'll close it for now by saying what I always do. Truth has no agenda. And thanks for watching.